Hello, and welcome to A Dash of Salt. I'm Dr. Shelley Ann, and I'm so glad you're here. Whether you stumbled upon this podcast by accident or you're here because the subject drew you in, welcome. SALT is an acronym for Society and Learning Today. This podcast was created as an outlet for inviting fresh discussions on sociology and learning theories that impact your world. Each episode includes a wide range of themes that focus on society and everyday learning, whether formal or informal. So let's get stuck in, shall we? Welcome to A Dash of Salt. Today I'm joined by Dr. Evgenia Likhovtseva. Dr. Likhovtseva is a scholar practitioner working in the field of global higher education policy. She works for the Trinity College Dublin Global Relations Office and currently is developing her scholarly publications based on academic research projects concerning the geopolitics of higher education, internationalization, and student recruitment and post-COVID-19 higher education recovery. She was recently awarded her PhD for a doctoral thesis that she completed on higher education policy in BRICS nations at Trinity College Dublin and holds a master's degree in public policy and management, which she received jointly from the University of Brunei, Darussalam, and UC Berkeley. Welcome, Evgenia. I'm delighted to have you on the podcast to talk about your research on world-class universities, BRICS nations, the geopolitics of higher education, and international student recruitment.
Hi. Saturday.
Yes.
Pretty good.
On a Saturday.
To talk about higher education.
Yeah. Cross countries. You're home visiting.
Yeah, I am the first time in 1.5 years after pandemic. I'm just visiting home. Yeah.
Yeah. And normally you would be actually either here in Ireland or in England. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I live in London, but work remotely for Trinity in Dublin.
So, Evgenia, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and about your program of research.
How to begin with? Basically, my interest in higher education began in 2013 when I finished my undergrad. My first degree is philosophy, and I decided what I'm going to do with it. And I decided to maybe just try public policy and to see how it's going to go. And I got a grant, a scholarship. I went to study in Brunei and after that to United States for 6 months. And I got my degree in public policy and I started looking at certain things related to education. And after that, I applied for PhD and my interests in actually global south, how other people live in a non-European context and how education is going there and what traditions do they have, how these traditions relate to, let's say, European historical traditions and so on. I decided, I need to do something to do with it and just start working on research related to so-called world-class university. Basically, today we know what is world-class university because it's everywhere. If you just type it in Google, you see just 100 websites talking about Harvard, Cambridge, Oxford, Trinity. I'm gonna advertise Trinity. Basically, it's education that promotes something, culture of excellence, like in everything, in research, in collaboration, in education, learning, everything. And it's become, for me, kind of a question, okay, what other universities have to do with it? If it's just a university, not a world-class university, how do people study there? Where do they go? And how it relates to the non-European context, let's say. And I choose a topic related again to the Global South, BRICS countries. We heard about it, Brazil, Russia, China, South Africa, and India. It's more like a political alliance, but if you look at this in other aspects, like aspects of otherness, basically, it's different cultures to the Western world. And I start looking at their program of development, how they develop their education, what do they do with it, where they're going to go with it, and how they approach their higher education policies, and what different they're trying to, let's say, propose or achieve, let's say, to European universities, to American universities. basically what different they can offer to the world of global higher education. It's all about differences and similarities. At this point, China maybe just getting there yet. They kind of trying to get back this their tradition of Confucian learning, blending with social linguist Chinese characteristics. It's kind of an interesting mixture. But other countries, not there yet.
Did your own experiences as an international student get you interested in this research, or exactly what was it that really got you interested in it?
I think so, because I remember I was when I went to Brunei, it was absolutely different experience. I didn't expect what can I learn, how could I live there, what I gonna eat, how's my daily routine. It's a basically completely different world to Russia, but it was very interesting in terms of you start noticing how people live, what they do, and how they learn, how the education system works. And it got me thinking about that. Wow, we're all different, but also we're all similar. And yeah, I mean, when you study somewhere, as you know, Tao, you also was an international student, right? Recently, you kind of trying to be observed in the culture, but on the other hand, also trying to give something to other cultures. And I think I grew up really for that year in Brunei in terms of my personal development. And after that, I went to United States for another 6 months. It's also a completely different story, as for instance, to Russia. And I think I changed. I think being an international student, changing your personality. But in order to achieve these results, you have to kind of try to know people, try to get connected, try to understand others, and just be flexible about it. Just you need to learn. You have to have the willpower for learning to do this. You kind of be open-minded about it.
And how old were you the first time you went international for your studies?
I think I was 24. Yeah, it was my 25th birthday in January, and I arrived in December. I was 24. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's quite a young age to really be thinking about. One of the things that you said that really struck me was you said, going international it's one thing to learn about the cultures and the people, and the learning that you're getting for yourself, but also what are you giving back to and what are you contributing to of your learning to those other countries. And I think that, that's a really interesting perspective, especially at a young age like that, to think interculturally.
Yeah, that's true. But you have this certain feeling of expectations because people want to know about Russia. Let's say nobody in Brunei, like people don't know anything about Russia, part of Moscow, Putin, and it's very cold. I began noticing that. Well, I have to tell people something to people because I just cannot say, yeah, it is. That's it. And I would like them to know more about Russia and would like more about our culture and how do we live there and etc. And I kind of start building this idea of giving back, and it's kind of helped me to build communication too with other people.
So your research on geopolitics of higher education, internationalization, and student recruitment, tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. I'm now working in the global relations office in Trinity College Dublin. I'm a kind of it's a mixture between I'm an analyst and researcher, and I'm trying to see what trends are, to what direction winds flows. Basically, after pandemic, we kind of live in the age of uncertainty. We don't know. We just can speculate how it's, let's say, global recruitment gonna be in a year or in 6 months because pandemic changed everything. And my role is just kind of to see and observe various trends, what's going on in the field of higher education and especially recruitment, what areas, let's say, what regions potentially can be interesting for us. Let's say everyone knows now that China is kind of the dominant in terms of sending students abroad to the US, United Kingdom, obviously, and Australia. But after Brexit, basically only one English-speaking country, and basically it's kind of to get attraction from students outside of EU. Basically this kind of things. It's my role to predict and analyze and see what's going on, but again, we never know. Pandemic changed everything. I like this work because you start looking at, again, various regions. For instance, MENA region, the Gulf region, basically that countries which potentially can be in, like, let's say 5 years or 10 years time, might get a pace of economic development, kind of a high economic development, and they might stand sending students abroad, and they might become, I wouldn't say new China, but they might become kind of powerful, let's say, and better developed, and for universities it might be kind of new potential for recruitment. For instance, for now, we like not many students from Morocco coming to study to Ireland, right? But maybe in 5 years' time, Moroccan government decided to invest in human capital, and for us, it's opportunity to recruit their students and kind of build this bridge between Ireland and Morocco. These kind of things. I think global relations, it's not only about obviously recruitment; it's about building relationships and trust and partnership with other country. And when we go to geopolitics of higher education, because higher education has a vital component of being that bridge. If you remember that during the Cold War, it was one of the most powerful tools in terms of spreading so-called soft power, because Russia, Soviet Union, actively invested in Africa, recruited students from Africa and come into the Soviet Union to study, while, let's say, United States actively recruited students from Latin America. And it was also a distribution of interests and distribution of power, I would say. And the first university, if I'm not mistaken, was People's Friendship University of Russia, was established in 1960s. And basically it was and still is kind of a very international university. And for Soviet government, it was important that people from different countries, especially countries of influence, right, Asia, China, Africa, come in there to study, train, and go back, kind of the ideology of the country, and kind of bring that seeds back. That's the idea maybe of geopolitics. Now kind of there are different vibe about it, I would say. But regionalization is very hot topic, because there are certain universities and networks which are non-traditional to, let's say, like world-class university concept. For instance, a European university in Florence, it's kind of university about Europe, kind of about the region. They're interested in what's going on in the region, in the European region, and what's connected with it, for instance. And it's kind of a different university model, because it's based on investments of different countries, let's say, to their endowment. Another example, it's BRICS Network University. Basically, it's a partnership between, they don't have physical body, but they have a partnership and kind of exchange ideas that, let's say, students from Russia coming to China for a year, and from China to Brazil, and again, knowing the I wouldn't call it the BRICS region, but if we think about it as a global south, we kind of say, yeah, it's a regional story, because it's about connection of these countries with each other, not only in political and economic sense, but the most importantly, in cultural sense.
It's interesting that you're talking about that when you said about non-traditional colleges and universities, because one of the trends that I've been seeing at least over the past 2 years here in Ireland is that many non-traditional, like you said, not world-class universities, so those schools would actually be taking satellite schools to like the UAE, or actually recruiting more of those students here. Is that something that you would be more aware of, or?
There are a lot of campuses already building abroad. I mean, it's an industry. If we think about higher education as an industry, we can see that there are a lot of universities, Western universities, which already have campuses abroad. For instance, one of the richest countries and, let's say, well developed is United Arab Emirates. And if you look at United Arab Emirates, you have, how many colleges? 32 branch campuses there. In that only small country, already 32 universities of Western, not only West, by the way, but also India, Lebanon, Sri Lanka. Russia has also like a campus there. Basically go to the region and open their campuses. It's kind of one way of doing business. But on the other hand, there are universities that are not interested to open a campus abroad, because an idea is that students have to come there to get knowledge rather the other way around. I would think about only through the kind of idea of business idea. Let's say Oxford, right? They're not interested to build a campus abroad because people will come to Oxford anyway, because you're not only coming for knowledge, you're coming for environment, for people, for the history. You want to kind of be the part of the Oxford history, let's say. You want to breathe the same air as people did 400 years ago. You want to sit in this building. You want to touch these books and just walk the path. It's kind of more about story of being there, rather than just get a degree from the prestigious university. For instance, INSEAD, right, business school INSEAD, they go in establish campus abroad. Maybe the idea just to build a global network of people. If you think about campuses abroad, maybe we can think about this from the position of building a global network. Basically, you have a few campuses in China, in Dubai, in Saudi Arabia, in Africa. It's kind of a network of different of the same universities, but with different campuses, and people can travel, then can move between campuses. They can start learning about the local cultures, start meeting each other. It's kind of a different vibe, I would say, but also it's a business model.
And what about building blended and online learning opportunities to open that up to other countries? I know, I'm not sure if world-class universities are looking at this yet, but I understand that, again, non-traditional colleges and universities that wouldn't be part of the world-class university sect have been talking about building and are in the process of building some blended and online learning opportunities to bring in international students where they can study in place from their own country. What is your idea of that?
I think in the beginning of pandemic, it was kind of very attractive idea, because university can reorient their resources and just put everything online. And maybe from logistical point of view, it could be easy. But from the student point of view, it's kind of tricky, because a lot of, let's say, majority of them are self-funded. And again, people come in for the environment and for connections, for networking, for cultural experience, for the city, for everything which not directly related to higher education itself. But suddenly you just taken it from them, and a lot of discussions now going on that online learning, maybe it's a way when a person already in a country, let's say you come into Ireland and you have a certain, I don't know, like mixture between blending between online and offline classes. Yeah, it can be a model, but when you just sit in Russia or in China or in Saudi Arabia and doing all your classes online and paying like 20,000 euro, it's a bit of a question. You don't see the people, you don't talk to professors personally, you don't sit in that classrooms, and you don't experience the student life fully, but you are charged so much that just, I find it unfair personally.
That's a very good point. Because at first my thought process would be, it opens up sort of, the opportunity to study at an international college, but without having to pay living expense and things like that. We know how expensive it is to live in Ireland. But you make a really good point, because they're not charging any less for that education, whether it be online or physically in person. And you're right. I didn't think about the fact that some people may sit back and say, wait a second, if I'm going to pay, like you said, 20,000 or whatever a year to study at this school, I want to be physically part of it.
And also, actually, universities themselves, they don't want to reduce costs because they have a lot of facilities, infrastructure, people, and logistics they have to manage. They are not ready to put prices down anyway. They're going to go up, not down. And this is, from the student, we're talking about student-centered education, but it's university-centered education, not the student. I don't think it's going to be future.
And I know back about 10 years ago in the US, so from my own experience and perspective, anytime, somebody did fully online learning from a college or university that was fully online, there was a stigma attached to that. So when I worked at a university, and when we were getting transcripts in from transfer students coming in, maybe they wanted to go on to do their master's or something like that, or they started their education fully online, there was a stigma attached to the fact that they had started their or gone to a college or university that was fully online, that was a reduced quality education because it was delivered fully online. So I do believe myself that this is very much changing, that the face of blended and online learning is changing, and giving people more accessibility. But I think the important key is that the idea of blended rather than fully online. You have that ability to do some of your classes in person physically, but then you have the convenience if you're maybe living in remote locations where you can do a lot of your learning online and then maybe only have to travel to campus once a month or something like that rather than several times a week.
Yeah, that's true. And also, if you look at data, that a lot of students, if you look at their preferences, for instance, some of them detoured from the US to Scandinavia, because in US you have to start online and nobody knows for how long. But in Scandinavia, let's say in Denmark, you can go physically there because their COVID policy maybe, I don't know, more student friendly. And people start changing their mindset because, well, I'm gonna invest in my education anyway. And from how gonna do it, what the best option for me. And actually study destinations now a bit shifting towards those countries which policies are more human oriented, kind of more open and more that you can live and physically be there rather than online.
So let's go back. I have a question now, going back to the when I was talking about stigmas and the idea of one, not that it's a stigma to go to Trinity. It's actually obviously very much an honor. But I want to flip back to the world-class universities, and that was actually one of the reasons why when I was accepted to Trinity, I thought no matter what, come hell or high water, I was going to make my way to Ireland to do my PhD at Trinity because it's Trinity and it's world renowned, right? So you were saying world-class university. How do you think that world-class universities influence processes of learning for students?
I think actually I wanted to ask you a question, but you already answered. How did you choose the university? Did you look at any rankings, or you just knew about Trinity?
Well, I had come to do a study abroad. Just interestingly, again, as part of my master's, I did a very brief summer study abroad at Trinity. It came over for with one of my modules, with one of my classes for my master's, and absolutely fell in love with. We were on the Trinity campus. We spoke to people from the School of Education because obviously my master's was in education, and I just absolutely loved it. And there was something that you had said earlier about the idea of touching the bricks and feeling the books and being a part of that. And that's what I felt when I was here for my study abroad, being on the campus at Trinity. And again, me being from a country that's very young, right, as far as the United States, being a very young country and not having the infrastructure that's so aged and so much history rich deep and lengthy history like that Trinity has had, and so when I just absolutely fell in love with it. And when I went home, I, was finishing up my master's, I thought, in the US, one of the things is diversify your degrees. So I had already gotten my undergraduate, so my bachelor's degree and my master's at Ferris State University. Fabulous, learning, and absolutely loved it, that experience, and really high quality education. But like I said, I wanted to go on to do my PhD, and I was looking at diversifying my degree meant that I had to look somewhere else to go get that PhD, right? And because I was working at Ferris, one of the really amazing benefits, how expensive education is in the US, absolutely unbelievably expensive. And because I was an employee at Ferris, I was able to get my undergraduate and my master's degree paid for, tuition free. So, me going on to do my PhD, I knew that I was going to be looking at an expense there to get my PhD. So I didn't really want to look to get my PhD somewhere in the US, because I knew how expensive it was going to be. And I started looking, again, I had to have the experience with Trinity, and I thought, I'm going to, send a proposal there for my PhD, and just see where it goes. And, everything fell into place. I was able to get a student fellowship from the School of Education that paid for my tuition, so that I really needed to focus on just living and working and learning while I was here, and not have to worry about where I was going to get the funding to pay for my tuition as well, which was amazing at Trinity to get any type of fellowship, no matter how big or small. For me, it was a win-win situation, and a no-brainer. And so that's why I came over. But that was my reasoning, was exactly what you had said earlier, was because I wanted to be physically here on the campus. I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to get my PhD from that globally renowned, university.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did, because my kind of logic was very similar. I knew about Trinity before, because everyone kind of knew about Trinity, and I wanted to go there too. And I didn't look at university rankings, but on the back of my mind, I was like, maybe check just in case what place they are in, like 2015. And after that, I start checking what every year I start looking at the position of Trinity in World University rankings. And the problem is, because rankings agencies are kind of a monopoly, because there are like a few, the globally known, like Times Higher Education and QS. I call them monopolists, because they do business in the area where nobody does really. And they have a lot of products for universities, offering different services related to world classness, from consulting to marketing to recruitment events, to kind of related consulting related to infrastructure, these kind of things. And the problem is that any university today can have a bit of world classness. If in 2000, let's say 10, it was just a big deal to be world class, the whole story, the whole university. Now you can have the highest percentage of international students, be world class there, or the most entrepreneurial university, or have the best campus, I don't know, with green flowers or red flowers, or you can have the highest percentage of professors with Nobel prizes, and etc., etc. And like there are a lot of variants, a lot of directions where you can go world class, and it's not necessarily related with education. It could be related with whatever that is.
Yeah.
And I find it's very speculative, because some, let's say, University A invest a lot of money and give a lot of scholarships for international students just to be a part of that game. And for 2020, this University A can have this label from QS. Look, we are the most international university in this country. Is it for class, really? Is it about education? Is it about learning? Or it's about just branding and nice marketing? And this is the question. And these agencies are growing, and they build in so many services. Now, for instance, virtual campuses. It's a big deal. What campus is prettier? What visualization is nicer? And it's another part of the, I don't know, the marketing stake where you have to create a nice virtual campus, visually attractive, user-friendly, and people and person go to your site and look, oh, this is pretty, I'm gonna go there. Is it about education or it's about something else?
Mm.
But still, we have the world-class label. And now scholars say, and I mean, maybe even within administrative community of universities, there are conversations about maybe we have to concentrate on regions, on, let's say, problem of the certain regions where this university is built. There is this university located. Maybe it's not about work class, it's about actually necessity of this university being in a certain place, what it can give to people, to the region, to the country. A lot of countries, let's say in my research, I look at BRICS, Brazil, Russia, China, and South Africa, just a reminder, and India. Basically, every government of this country had a policy, and policy is copy and paste from university ranking strategy. It's all like reflect there how many international students we need, what collaborations we do this year, what infrastructure we're going to build. And is it about country's policy or it's about fit into the rankings? And rankings are also tricky and funny because they start building regional rankings. You not necessarily have to be the first in the world, but you can be first in BRICS. It's also good. And or first in Asia, or first within young universities, or you can be first in Southeast Asia or Latin America. Basically, you can expand and expand, and there is no end. And if you invest in their products, you can be potentially first in something, and it's pretty good and have the label.
Right. And again, you said something, you touched on something that really spoke to me, and that was that idea of the importance of the whether it's world class university ranked or not, the importance of colleges and universities and where they're physically placed, their location, and how important they are to the communities and to the people that live within those communities for jobs, for access to education. And so I think you're absolutely, right in the fact that, quality education is key, really, at the end of the day, whether it's a world class ranked university or it's not listed as a world class ranked university, there can be a very high quality education that comes out of these smaller colleges and universities that are situated in certain areas, and the importance they are to their location that they're physically in, and who lives in there and around there, and who is able to access that learning. Because at the end of the day, learning should be accessible for anyone.
Yeah.
So you researched and taught in China for many months. What did you experience, and what did you do, and what was it like?
Oh, it's a good question because I love China. I can talk about China a lot and long. Basically, I went there as a research fellow to Fudan Development Institute, the part of Fudan University in Shanghai. It's a big university with quite of old history. It's a very interesting place to be. And Shanghai itself is, I think, one of my favorite cities in the world. It was a part of my research related to China. I had to, because I was writing about world-class university policies, and I had to talk to people, conduct a few interviews, potentially speak with policymakers and academics, and just see how they're approaching creation of world-class university policies there. I had to deliver a few lectures. I was lecturing for a while, and it was more about my research and what I'm doing. But for Chinese for the department, it was very interesting in terms of how what they can learn about other countries, let's say about Russia. And I trying to reorient my focus, let's say, for what they're going to be useful for them to, let's say they were interested in terms of how Russian approaches professional education, because there's an idea that maybe university is not only one way to educate people and to invest more in professional educations, because in the Soviet time, professional schools were everywhere. It was, let's say, one of the first steps to get a degree, and after that you can go to university or just go straight to the career. And I think for Chinese that time it was at least in my research, it was interest in what other countries do in their policy level. In terms of experience of teaching, I think teaching in Asia is kind of different than teaching in Europe, because people don't really ask many questions. They kind of take it as it is, and sometimes it's difficult to challenge. But the best way to approach it is maybe to start ask questions and just build a discussion. I did interviews with professors, with academics. To tell the truth, when you don't speak language, when you have a translator or person don't speak, let's say, English that well, in order to communicate certain difficult ideas, it's a bit of a tricky game, because it's all about understanding. It's all about kind of a language game. And let's say sometimes it was just a circle. We go around and around and around, and you just cannot get any point from it. No, first of all, let's say there is certain, let's say, censorship, things that you cannot say at all. And it just, I wouldn't say my interviews was very useful, because I knew it already. I could read it before in every open source, and people just repeat the same mantra all over again. That's why if you want to do really kind of deep and meaningful conversations, I think person at least have to speak maybe the same language, or will be open to talk. Obviously it was anonymously, but on the other hand, maybe when you talk in this university representatives and academics within university, everyone is conscious, and also they might know that other people know that I talk to them, I arrange interviews, and it's maybe monitored, and they may be in troubles after that. That's why it was very censored. But I mean, and I got it actually after a while. I some of my colleagues didn't understand. Let's say it was a guy from America. He came also for certain interviews, talk to people, and people didn't talk to him, or just repeat the same mantra all the time. And he asked me like, "Why are they not gonna talk to me?" And I said, "Because they can't." You can, I mean, they might say something useful to you, and you might get extract information which you might think relevant for research, but don't expect that much, because we live in a particular environment, in a particular place. There are people not that free to express their thoughts, especially it might go public, it might go to a journal, it might go whatever. That person can be traced. Even you say participant A said, and they're gonna publish it in international journal, and it's gonna be read, and person troubles. And basically that's this kind of vibe I got. It was interesting to be there, because it gives you other perspective in terms of learning. People invest a lot of their time in learning. It's very competitive, because China is a big country, and to be enrolled in university, you have to go through a lot of preparation and pass the Gaokao well. It depends how well, it depends on your scores and where you go. People ask me like, "What are you doing here? Like, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing PhD, but I'm from Trinity College Dublin. I'm a fellow here, and I'm just for a few months to do my research." And they say, "Wow, you should be very smart." I was like, why? I mean, if you want PhD, you can write a good proposal, and you may be accepted, and you just have to work for it for a while and get things done. And they say, "No, it's not that easy. I have to sit 5 exams. I just have to find a professor. I have to be accepted." And it's just a long story. And basically, when you say I'm doing PhD, it means it's a big deal, like a really big deal. But in that part of the world, it's like, wow, it's super, it's so cool. And I was, "Oh, that's good. Feel proud."
Exactly. So, you've talked a little bit about your work at the global office with Trinity College. And, what I'd like to hear a little bit more about are the kinds of things that students are expected to learn when they come to study abroad, whether formal or informal. What are some of the things that, there's an expectation, obviously, formally, that they're expected to learn, but maybe even some of the informal learning that occurs as well?
When you do certain events, let's say recruiting events, a lot of people, it's not only about education and tuition fees, it's about Dublin, it's about a country, Ireland, it's about language, it's about the English language, it's about visa policies, because for some people, for instance, for Russians, education can be a step to immigrate. For some people, yeah, it's an immigration story. For some people, it's a networking story, or maybe open horizons and work after that for a global market, be part of the Google, Facebook, and kind of open the door to work in corporate environment. Basically, it's kind of the bridge, not necessarily related only with education. There are obviously certain demand for catchy professions. Let's say now it's a data science is a big deal. Everyone is going for data science, like everyone. Not enough places already, but still people going for data science. It was computer science, obviously, engineering, um, biotechnological sector, and this kind of things. Yeah, there are people know there are expectations that it's gonna be enrollment all the time, but other actually schools and other programs starting to expand their curriculums. They're trying to fit something what is in demand with something that can be useful for your personal development as a human being, which I find it kind of remarkable, because yeah, you can get a degree in data science, but you have to grow, you have to build yourself as a personality. And it's kind of a lot of mixture going on now in terms of rethinking curriculum, what we can incorporate to make our curriculum more diverse and not only useful. Education is not only about usefulness, it's about also pleasure, it's about growth, it's about being a better person. Maybe it's a bit idealistic, I don't know. Do you think so?
Well, I mean, I think, when anybody goes to study abroad, there's a certain level of idealism that comes along with it. What are my expectations personally to get out of living and, learning in a different culture? But then, what is my ideal of, that, from my experience, that world-class, university education and, and stepping away from it. Yeah, I do think that I got a high quality education. But the informal learning that I received from living here and being part of the Irish culture for the past going on 5 years now, I'm in my 5th year, those types of experiences, I think will set with me longer and actually give me more of that global perspective than what I did with my research in the PhD. Could I have done the same type of research in any other country or in my own country? Absolutely. But I think for me, I was very, very profoundly impacted by my informal learning experiences, living and being part of the Irish culture here, for me. But at the end of the day, when my graduation came around, I was the first one to graduate during the pandemic. So I graduated sitting on my couch, listening to my name called off online. And so that whole idea that I had in my head of, oh my goodness, I'm going to stand in the square and I'm going to throw my cap and I'm going to have this wonderful experience of, being a PhD graduate, of Trinity College, Dublin. I didn't get that. And so, that was a big letdown. But again, looking at the whole experience, living here, learning here, and being here, in Ireland and being immersed in the Irish culture and becoming, a part of so many Irish families and, and even feeling Irish myself, I know you're laughing and smiling there. And I know that's because hopefully it's okay for me to say this, that, you've now married an Irishman.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, become part of a big Irish family. You marry the family.
Exactly. So for me, the informal learning really far outweighed my formal learning for me.
Yeah. A lot of people, they are interested in this. Not only about the employability and courses on demand. Yeah, it's about life too. Obviously, people asking about, and they're interested about housing, about prices, about how they're gonna make friends, they're gonna have their first pint of Guinness, and it's a part of the story of kind of global relations. We're building connections, we're building partnerships, we're talking to people, talking about university, telling about our university.
Yeah, and the cultural immersion.
Yeah, cultural immersion. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are some of the challenges that you've seen over this past year that international students have had to face since the onset of the pandemic?
Oh, I think when it just began in the understanding of this, I think the totality of pandemic and realization of it in, I think, February 2020, people start talking about it seriously. A lot of students, I think everywhere in the world, they just didn't realize that they have to go home. And a lot of countries are very brutal about it, like Australia. You have to go. That's it. There's no negotiation. And actually, it rose a lot of questions that, well, we just take all these students, they pay a lot of money to study here, but they don't have any protection. They don't have any, I wouldn't say respect, but they don't integrate fully in our community. They don't have security and insurance in terms of like to live safely, to be here and not rush to their homes. And border can be closed like in a day or two, you never know. And people lost a lot of money and their families too. And it was, I think, it was a disaster. Um, I think in Ireland it was not that brutal in comparison to other countries like Australia again. But still, people experienced a lot of pressure, uncertainty, and they lost money and they didn't know what's going to happen with their degrees or their future. And they put they were locked in their homes, and dormitories had to be closed. They were forced to leave, and it's difficult to rent, or maybe you have to go to rent, or you cannot talk to friends because you have to self-isolate all the time. It was a disaster. And the services which were provided it wasn't enough at all. It was very little done from the position of international students. Nothing really. And now I think it should be kind of, we have to rethink this situation, because how are we going to treat our students? Why do they take them? For what purpose? And it's not only about again, like getting your career or your good education and well get yourself settled in life. It's about being part of this country, even for 5 years, even for 3 years. What protection do they get from it? And I think even, let's say, governments who send students to study abroad, or let's say even Chinese governments, what they done this year, they advised people not to study abroad this year, because I think it was observed that, I wouldn't say they're not welcome. They are welcome, but they not take care of well enough. And now it's discussion going on about it, that people are not integrated, they're not protected. We should stop treating them like cash cows, because it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's really wrong.
Yeah, and the recovery. So I know that you have an interest in the post-COVID-19 higher education recovery, and I'm sure that that's not only just from the higher education or the institutional perspective, but also from the student experience perspective and protecting the students and things like that. Can you tell me a little bit about what you think going forward that looks like?
Oh, it's a good question. I wrote a paper about it in August 2020, but it's July now, 2021. I think it's going to be out pretty soon, hopefully. And that time I thought that I was talking about infrastructure, that a lot of facilities are going to be unused, let's say from catering to dormitories, and maybe I was talking about cities and urban spaces and urban environment, that maybe university has to kind of reuse this buildings, facilities, think about the kind of expansion of locations, maybe made spaces like safer, bigger, or maybe take less students. Kind of, I was talking from the perspective of urban environment and safety and usage of spaces themselves. But in terms of predictions, things changing very fast. And if last year we thought like nobody gonna come, no, people still going abroad, but they start changing their destinations. As I said before, let's say less people coming to the US, more people going to Scandinavia. There is a reorientation and rethinking in terms of there to study. And actually, regionalization of education taking place faster and faster, because some people prefer, a lot of students actually, a lot of potential students prefer to study where they are or study in their countries. Let's say Chinese, right? They build a lot of universities. They have very strong sector of higher education, and they also encourage their students to stay there. Just you can go from province A to province B, but just don't go abroad. You also actually, in terms of regionalization, another factor that students studying within their region. Let's say Indians go to China or Thailand or to Japan. Basically, regional migration is going on now more than ever, and they go to our neighbors, basically, or we go to countries which are safer, which has a better policy towards COVID, or maybe handle this problem better with a wider community, like parents, government bodies, sponsorships, not only about students anymore. It's becoming a complexity and totality of this.
Yeah. Evgenia, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. I really miss you. I miss having you here in Ireland. I miss seeing you on campus and being able to have the chats together and that kind of thing.
Coffee.
And I do look forward to that day, God willing, when we can do it again someday, actually see each other and not be, talking virtually into microphones and earphones and things like that through laptops. But any final parting words before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great discussion. It made me thinking, because we touched so many questions today, and it's kind of give you a perspective what to do next, to think deeper about maybe obvious problems, but then you start talking about it, expressing it. You think, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. And maybe just settle certain perspectives for the future, for trends, for how world's gonna work in a month, even 2, in a year. We don't know. This is a problem. We don't know now. But I hope we will. We're gonna be fine. We're gonna be fine. Thank you for just giving me this opportunity.
I hope that you've enjoyed this discussion on A Dash of Salt, a space where you'll always find fresh and current discussions on society and learning today, seasoned with just the right touch of experts in education and a dash of sociological imagination. Please be sure to like and share this episode, and don't forget to subscribe to A Dash of Salt on Podbean so that you don't miss the next episode. Thanks so much, and we'll chat again soon.